Well, we're now 3 weeks into January. Perhaps you've realised that you're not as organised as you would like to be. Be honest, it all feels like a total mess and you're drowning underneath it all. If that's you, then you need a productivity reset. Maybe it's not that bad, but still your system, it feels messy, unwieldy, and you need to sort it all out. Welcome to Effective Faith. This is episode 37 of the Effective Faith podcast. How to do a productivity reset. My name's Chris Wood and I run Effective Faith, helping you to be more than just productive. At Effective Faith, our aim is to intentionally focus on what matters most, to resist the productivity idol, and to help Christians live effectively for Christ in their everyday life and work. Every single one of us, at some point in our life, will start to feel like things are just getting messy. We're just not on top of life the way that we want to be. When that happens, we need to press the reset button. But how do you actually do that? The first thing to say is this is going to take some time, maybe a whole day, perhaps even more than that. And you're probably thinking, well, I don't have time for this. So ask yourself, what is worse? Losing a day now to get things tidy, or losing an hour a day, every day, for months to come, as you try and navigate through with the mess? We often think that taking time out to get things organised is time that's wasted, time that we cannot afford. But the reality is that the opposite is true. Not doing this is something that we can't afford. So the first thing to do, block out some time for this exercise, and then you need to do two things. Kill the bloat and prune the branches. So part one, kill the bloat. Anyone who wants to be productive is going to train themselves to do two things. Capture everything and then organise it well. It is therefore inevitable that your productivity system becomes bloated. Some ways of organising your work and some productivity systems, they suffer from this far more than others. It's worth bearing that in mind. Therefore, it will become necessary to develop a process to deal with this problem. So, let's consider how to do a productivity reset by killing the bloat. Now, before we actually think about the system itself, we need to start with all of those things that we've captured and organised into the system. Let's think about projects. Now, I've just completed a review of my project list: current, active, future, and someday or hopeful projects. What I found is that quite a lot of these projects didn't actually need to be there. It's likely the same is true for you as well, so go through that list. Look for the following things: projects that you no longer care about, projects that aren't really projects at all, they're basically just big tasks or a process to follow. Projects that aren't defined as projects. You see, one of mine was study history. Well, that's useless. It doesn't mean anything. It's not well defined enough to be of any use to me. Projects that are basically complete or perhaps have been superseded by other things. Or projects that are basically duplicates of others. Now, I found a few that, whilst they're worded differently, they were basically the same thing, and I just captured or organised them at different times. Doing this is going to trim down your project list significantly. I also decided to move my someday maybe hopeful list out of my project list and into a separate note in my notes app. They're not projects really that I'm thinking about, they're just things that I hope to look at maybe at some point in the future. They don't really belong on a projects list. Tasks. That one's next up for me. Now, there are a few things that I want to think about here. So, routine and recurring tasks. Are these all still relevant? Are they all still needed? I found some Routine and recurring tasks that related to previous work, previous places that I lived, they're not needed anymore, so I got rid of them. Maybe there's tasks that you created a long time ago, and they're just sitting there. I think when I do this, I look for tasks that I created more than 8 months ago but are not recurring. And then I ask if I still care about them, if they're still relevant, if I still have any plan to actually do them. I plan to look over all of my other tasks as well and ask the same question. The difference will be that for tasks that are older than 8 months, the default is going to be to remove them unless I can think of a good reason not to. Your calendar. Most of the things that go onto my calendar actually get entered as and when they're needed, but I have several recurring events to cover fixed things as well as time I've scheduled for specific recurring work. Now, if you have a similar approach, it's worth checking that these events are all still needed, that they're all still accurate, and they're all still for scheduled work that is set for the best time for you to actually do it. You see, life changes, and with those changes, our needs change. The calendar is a place that you can reflect these changing needs. Review your calendar. Files. Now, this might be a bigger thing, this might need a lot more time, but I find it helpful maybe once, maybe twice a year to go through the files in my filing system a bit. It helps me to keep on top of archiving, backing things up, and making sure that nothing needs moving or removing if it's just no longer helpful to keep it. You see, how to do a productivity reset? Well, part one is kill the bloat. It's to do with the content within your productivity system. You see, part two, therefore, is about looking at the system itself. Part two, prune the branches. You see, this is where we move to cut back any parts of our system itself that are not helpful, that are not needed. They're slowing us down, they're causing us to waste yet more precious time. Let me tell you about my old sat-nav. Now, at times in the past, I used to find myself driving up and down England on the A1, driving north. And if you don't know it, the A1 goes right up the spine of England, connecting London with Edinburgh. Now, there comes a point where you come off the A1 headed north and you drive west on the M18, or at least you can. Now, my old sat-nav used to tell me to do exactly that. It would tell me to come off the A1, drive 6.1 miles west on the M18, come off of it, go round a roundabout, and then drive 6.1 miles east, back on the M18, to join the A1 at exactly the point that I left, and continue my journey north. That's what my old sat-nav told me to do. So what can we learn about productivity from my old sat-nav? Don't do things just for the sake of it, or because something tells you to. It's very easy for your productivity, your organization, your information management system to become overloaded with useless branches. Very easy. All of this is in fact a complete waste of time. Worse, it actually makes organizing yourself far more unwieldy, it slows you down, and it will increase the stress of maintaining your system. So prune the branches, look at the applications that you're using as part of your productivity system. It's an essential part of keeping your system efficient and tidy. There are so many reasons why we might end up with more apps than we actually need. This can be a killer of our productivity and our efficiency. Now, some people are absolute purists when it comes to their app stacks. You're only allowed one Notes app, one cloud storage service, one task manager. Now, I'm not such a purist, but I do think there needs to be very good reasons to have more than one app in each type of category. Let me give you some examples of the ways in which the app branches get overgrown. You've always used Apple Calendar. You've joined a sports team, maybe, that organises everything in Google Calendar, and your new job insists everyone use Microsoft Outlook. So you now have events in 3 different calendar services, and you use all of them. Maybe you've used Evernote for a long time, but you've decided to switch to something else. You've ported some notes across to Notion, perhaps, and you did some stuff in Notion for a few months, but you didn't like it, so now you use Obsidian, but you still have an archive in Evernote and a few live projects still running in Notion. Your notes are spread across 3 applications. You use UpNote for your notes, but you've been using ClickUp Docs for projects, and so you have some information in both apps. Most of your files get stored in Google Drive, but you've got some stuff in Dropbox, some stuff in OneDrive, and then there was that free trial you got of something else that you put some stuff in there. Or maybe in a more generic sense, we're working with 2 apps for basically the same purpose. Both of them excel in different things and are incredibly weak in other things, so we use both. The more apps we have in our system, the more confusing it gets, the more time it needs to be spent maintaining it all, and the more likely it is we'll struggle to actually find the things that we need. Now, I'm not against having more than one similar app in my stack as a matter of principle. I just need a good reason for it. For example, I have been using Twos as a kind of a journal, bullet journal, notes and tasks app alongside everything else. Why? Because I like having an app that, in my head at least, sits outside of my normal system. It's great when I feel overwhelmed to go outside of that system that is trying to tell me what to do, and just independently of all of that, write down a list of what I'm actually going to do. So go through all of the apps that you're currently using, one by one, and ask them point blank to justify their existence. Ask, can I replicate their purpose in any of the other apps that I am currently using? What will I lose if I cut this out? What will I lose that can't be mitigated elsewhere? There's another way to prune the branches as well, organising for the sake of it. Now, I've written about this recently. Funnily enough, that blog post was titled Productivity in My Old Sat-Nav, or Don't Do Things for the Sake of It. You see, the point is very simple. Are there things in your system that are of little benefit? For example, employing a complicated system and structure of labels and tags, or writing out a plan for the day in a notebook, in a daily note in your Notes app, in your journal, and time blocking your day on your calendar. You've got 4 different places where you plan what you're going to do. Now, a common way that this actually happens is you read a blog post, you watch a YouTube video, or listen to a podcast like this from a productivity expert where they outline a part of their systems or their processes. And it sounds like it's such a good idea. So you work to incorporate that into your own system. But you don't stop to consider what value it adds or how it will or won't fit within the context of the rest of your system and processes. So examine the processes that you follow to organize and manage your work, your tasks, your projects, notes, files, and ask the question, what am I doing here that ultimately serves no purpose other than looking nice and being impressive on YouTube or social media? Let me give you a personal example, task management. I once used an app called Nirvana to manage my tasks. Great app for GTD people, especially if you're not on a Mac or in the Apple ecosystem. Nirvana allows you to mark up your tasks in multiple different ways. You can set up areas which would be your life areas, your life buckets. You have a separate list of contacts to reference people, and then you have labels separate to that for anything and everything you want. In addition, you have a whole host of options for marking the estimated time that a task will take, from 5 minutes to whoa Nelly, and then 3 different options for the energy that a task is going to require. Because the functionality was there, I used it. And when I processed every single task, I would consider each of these different things, mark up and label the task accordingly. Because it was there, like Everest, I climbed the mountain. When I ultimately switched to Todoist, I created a plethora of around 30 separate labels so I could replicate all of this in Todoist. And then, for each task, I would click on the label button and run down that full list each and every single time and apply whichever labels were relevant. Now, at some point down the line, I realized 2 things. The point of labeling your tasks is primarily to help you filter them and decide what to work on in any given moment. Most of these labels were never actually used for that purpose. Occasionally, I would use the 5-minute label to find a quick task if I had a free moment, but none of the others. I never used the people one. I never used the energy ones. So the second thing I realized was that going through this process was a complete waste of time. Like a trip 6 miles east on the M18 and back again. Applying these labels was a detour from effectively processing my new tasks that required time and effort, but didn't give any value. Life is messy. Have you noticed this? One big wibbly wobbly mess of stuff. It always ebbs and flows and chops and changes. In the Old Testament, in the Bible, the ancient nation of Israel used to observe something called the Year of Jubilee. This was a year every 50 years, if I remember rightly, where everything reverted back to its original family clan ownership. In part, this was about resetting things back to their original position. Every year, as part of my annual planning, I like to take some time out to reflect and to instigate the productivity and focus reset. Throughout the last 12 months, a lot has happened. In every period of 12 months, every year, a lot happens. As I reflect, I often find that my focus unknowingly shifts. Looking back, I find that my productivity system has gotten messy and muddled. So, the productivity and the focus reset. I've talked about the productivity reset, but the focus reset is the most important part. In the reality of life, the things that we give our time to are often not the most important things. This is normal. The purpose of the focus reset is to conduct a course correction. What this means is either shifting our current focus to be more in line with our intended focus, or perhaps amending our intended focus so that it is more up to date with our new and our refined priorities. Have you been working more recently, spending less time with your family? Now is the time to course correct. Has your exercise or diet shifted from what you wanted it to be? Course correct. Perhaps you have a new goal in life, or your circumstances have changed significantly. Well, course correct, update your intended focus. You see, the focus reset is an essential part of keeping our actual life aligned with what is important. If the focus reset is all about making sure the planned route is still taking you to the right destination, then the productivity reset is all about making sure that the vehicle you're travelling in is going to get you there. So I've talked about killing the bloat, I've talked about pruning the branches, key parts of any productivity reset. But there is a bit missing. If your productivity system is what guides you day to day, you have to be sure that it provides the capacity to direct your focus on what matters. For example, if you rely too heavily on a task manager, this might not be enough to help you when it comes to building friendships, relationships with family, and spending time with the people that you love and care about. You don't tend to put that on a to-do list. So think about what matters most to you. Think about what is important. Then ask a very simple question. How can my current productivity system direct me to give my time and focus to that? If the answer is that your system can't direct you to that, then the productivity reset, the focus reset, is needed to provide that capacity somehow. And I urge you, I plead with you, to take the time to do this. Thank you very much for listening. If you found this helpful and you're on YouTube, please do hit the like button, share it with friends and family, subscribe to the channel, leave a review of the podcast on whatever service you're listening on. Please do check out the next episode, and thank you very much for listening. See you next time on the next episode.